Thank you very much, Dave. And it's been a while, Dave, since we've had the opportunity to be on the same stage. It was great to see you here today. And I want to say hello, Karen. It's great to be here with you and your management team, Hector and the whole board of the Halifax Port Authority. Great to have you here, my colleague and friend, Andy Fillmore, and Mike Savage, the great mayor of Halifax. And Mike was terribly indiscreet this morning. It is true that he and I worked out together in the MP's gym most mornings. It's true, in fact, that his locker was next to mine in the MP's gym. In fact, Mike Savage was the first man I saw naked every day in Ottawa. There we are. Mike and I actually, Mike and I are here all week, folks. Mike's my straight man. Sorry. Enough of that. Okay. I am delighted to be here with you this morning. And the theme of your conference this year, the Port Days, is Go Global. And I thought I'd start, in fact, if our audio-visual folks are with us, if not, they can, here we are. I thought that picture, actually, it says that a picture says 1,000 words. Well, this one actually, I think, speaks volumes. The founder of Alibaba, along with our Prime Minister, in China recently, holding up lobsters. Now, those aren't just any lobsters. Those are Clearwater lobsters. And of course, Clearwater, one of Nova Scotia's great international champions. And I think it's a reminder to all of us of what we're capable of in Nova Scotia in terms of success on the international stage, in terms of trade. John Risley and Colin MacDonald started Clearwater 40 years ago. They recently had their 40th anniversary. And recently, John was awarded the Samuel Kennard Award for Vision, Courage, and Creativity. And both Samuel Kennard and John Risley, during their respective times, have built global empires in diverse industries, and they did so as Nova Scotians, as Haligonians. Samuel Kennard and John Risley are reminders to all of us of what we're capable of, but also of a reminder of the power of trade to build jobs and opportunities for Nova Scotians and for Canadians. And while in China, the Prime Minister also cited some other Nova Scotian companies. In fact, he mentioned Nova Scotia's own Van Dyke's health juice products as an example of how any business of any size can benefit from international trade. Today, e-shoppers in China can now shop on an online Canadian product platform, on Alibaba's Tmall global platform, to buy live Canadian Clearwater lobsters. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the opportunities for Canadian companies, large and small, to sell goods and services to the Chinese markets. Seafood exports from Nova Scotia to China have grown from 14 million in 2009 to 208 million in 2015. China represents Canada's second largest trading relationship, and as China's emerging middle class continues to grow, so do the opportunities for Canada. Our challenge is to ensure that more companies can achieve that same success like Clearwater, and growing those export opportunities. Shipping from ports like Halifax will grow jobs for Canadians. Now, we will do anything as a government, and we will use every opportunity to promote Nova Scotian and Canadian products anywhere in the world. It was no accident last January at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, that world-class Nova Scotian wine was served to and enjoyed by global elites. We will, as a government, take every opportunity we have to promote our products on the world stage. History has shown that trade can create jobs and growth, can expand the middle class, that it can boost standards of living and lift people out of poverty. Simply put, trade is truly the best stimulus in standing the test of time. But as a recent report by Deloitte has told us, governments can't do it alone. It's time for Canadian businesses to be bold and to do more to move into global markets. We want to see Canadian companies, especially SMEs, becoming bolder and expanding their global footprint. Trade is one of the main elements of our Atlantic growth strategy, which was launched recently, along with innovation, clean growth, infrastructure, and immigration. The Atlantic growth strategy was launched in early summer with the 4 Atlantic premiers and our federal government. The first action of that strategy was to launch the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. This pilot will use innovative approaches to actively engage employers in the recruitment and support of immigrants and families. It's going to focus on people who have the skills and the experience to meet our labor market needs in Atlantic Canada and to grow our economy. It will put more pathways to permanent residency and citizenship for international students who are studying here. As Mike said earlier, they are a source of opportunity for Nova Scotians. Through this initiative, in 2017, our government will increase the federal stream of immigrants by 2,000 immigrants plus their families in Atlantic Canada. And depending on the success of that, we expect it to be very successful. We are open to increasing further the federal stream of immigrants to Atlantic Canada. These immigrants represent natural bridges to some of the fastest growing economies in the world. And by providing a path to permanent residency and citizenship to international students, we're going to be tapping into new sources of innovation, and that is key to driving commercialization and to growing our exports. Growing immigration is just one way that we believe we can work with Canadian businesses as they take advantage of the market opportunities we're opening up in the world. We're also committed to working with our partners at the Halifax Port Authority. Canadian ports, including Halifax, are at the very heart of Canada's trade with 150 countries around the world. Our major ports are truly economic engines and gateways, facilitating the movement of nearly $400 billion worth of merchandise annually and contributing $25 billion to Canada's GDP. Marine transport accounts for a fifth of the volume of Canada's exports to the U.S., and over 95% of the commodities and processed goods Canada exports to other countries annually. The Halifax Port will remain a critical hub for the movement of goods as we continue to invest in initiatives such as the Big Ship Strategy. Some of these post-Panamax vessels have already come through this port, and as a Nova Scotian, I'm proud that our port can now offer direct connections to key markets, such as the southern region of China's Pearl River Delta via the port of Shenzhen. And while driving port growth is critically important, so is the need to ensure that this strategic asset, the Halifax Port, supports the needs of a vibrant, livable urban core for Haligonians and Nova Scotians. Recent reports of merger discussions between the 2 Halifax terminal operators, along with the prospect of the massive redevelopment of the Cogswell interchange, create a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to think and plan long-term about the future of the port, the future of the Halifax, and the future of Nova Scotia. These big long-range decisions should not be solely the purview of the Halifax Port Authority itself. As critical regional infrastructure, the municipal, provincial, and federal governments, the business community, and citizens all have an important stake in this conversation. I believe it's time to start that conversation now. You also have an advantage in that you have, as a member of Parliament from Halifax, and Andy Fillmore, an urban planner. And in partnership with a great mayor, Mayor Savage, Premier McNeil, and our federal government, we look forward to working hand in hand, side by side with the Port of Halifax to make the kinds of long-term decisions that can ensure that we do our very best to have a vibrant and livable downtown Halifax as a Nova Scotia's downtown, and that's Halifax. Canada, I want to talk a little bit about the trade and Nova Scotia trade, and it's important to Canada. Nova Scotians understand, of course, the importance of trade to our economy. It's important to realize the importance of trade to Canada. I mean, we are a maritime nation built on trade, from fur in the early days to seafood, oil, pharmaceuticals, automotive parts, aerospace, and blueberries today. Trade is as much part of Canada's national identity as hockey. Trade today is equivalent in size to some 60% of Canada's annual GDP, and 1 in every 5 Canadian jobs is related to exports. For a country the size of Canada, in terms of our population, we have a small, relatively small, open economy, so we depend on world trade to drive economic growth. To do that, we need first-class ports that can facilitate the quick and efficient movement of goods across the world and within North America. Here in Nova Scotia, we've always understood the importance of trade, and we've got a provincial government, Premier McNeil, and his government certainly understand that, and I commend him on his recent trip to China, a return trip for the World Economic Forum Summer Davos. Our government, our national government, is firmly committed to expanding trade with partners around the world, and we're counting on our partners like the Halifax Port Authority to help us promote Canada's progressive and inclusive trade agenda. Increased trade is one way that we will work to strengthen the middle class. Free trade is how we open markets for Canadian goods and services, grow Canadian jobs, create good-paying jobs, and provide choice and lower prices for Canadian consumers. A vital part of our government's trade agenda is CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the European Union, and we're working hard to get it done. Our Minister of International Trade, Chrystia Freeland, has been engaged with her EU counterparts since the beginning of the year to emphasize that Canada is absolutely committed to implementing our gold standard agreement with the EU as soon as possible. The ratification process was paralyzed under the previous government. CETA had stalled. Minister Freeland is working to address concerns about labor rights, environmental standards, and the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. CETA faces opposition from both the left and the right in Europe, and we're fighting protectionist sentiment, but we're making the case that CETA will bring more jobs and growth both to Canadians and to citizens of the EU. Minister Freeland is working hard to get the agreement signed in October with ratification to follow in 2017. We've also appointed the Honourable Pierre Pettigrew in August to be a special envoy to the CETA negotiations. Canadians from all regions stand to benefit significantly from the preferred access to the EU market. For Nova Scotia, the EU is already the province's second largest trading partner and export destination. And this agreement creates tremendous growth opportunities for all sectors in Nova Scotia. When it comes into force, CETA will eliminate tariffs on almost all of Nova Scotia's key exports, providing significantly expanded export access to this huge market. As the world's largest importer of fish and seafood, the EU represents tremendous export opportunities to Atlantic Canada's fish and seafood producers. And when CETA comes into force, almost 96% of EU tariff lines for fish and seafood will be duty-free. 7 years later, 100% of these tariff lines will be duty-free, making these world-class goods more competitive and creating the condition to grow sales. This will directly benefit hardworking Canadians through more jobs, higher wages, and greater long-term prosperity. In addition to this, once completed, CETA will immediately eliminate EU tariffs on Canadian exports of forestry and value-added wood products. And CETA will also allow Canadian service providers greater access to the EU market. They will benefit from provisions in CETA that guarantee market access for professional services and investment, as well as provisions that will ease regulatory barriers, reinforce intellectual property rights, and ensure more transparent rules for market access. With CETA implemented, Canada will have preferential access to the world's two largest economies, the EU and the US. This will place the Port of Halifax at the very center of our trade expansion efforts. As I mentioned at the beginning, though, there are many other important destination points for Canadian goods and services around the world. Chief among them are the countries in the Asian Pacific region, China and India in particular. There are a few places in the world that offer as many exciting opportunities for expanding growth and prosperity through trade and investment than the Asia Pacific region, particularly China. As one of the largest and fastest growing economies in the world, China is an important part of the global economy, a tremendously important partner for Canada. Canadian companies have been doing business in China for nearly a century. There are now 400 Canadian companies that are active in doing business in China. In 2015, our bilateral trade with China reached $86 billion, and China is now Canada's second largest trading partner. But there's more for us to do. There's a reason why Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is out there rebooting Canada's relationship with China. It's a critically important one to Canada and to Canadian jobs and opportunity. Canada's trade network in China is one of our largest. There are 15 locations of trade offices in China, 100 trade commissioners. We believe we can do more in strengthening their work. We also have very strong people-to-people ties. China is Canada's top source of foreign students, one of the top 3 sources of immigrants, and the 3rd largest source of tourists to Canada. There are also great synergies between Chinese economic plans and our trade policies. The Chinese 5-year plan announced in March specifically calls for increased investment in emerging technologies like aerospace, nuclear power, high-speed rail, energy, and new materials. These are all areas where Canada plays a leadership role. The plan also underscores that by 2020, nearly 60% of the Chinese population will be urbanized, with increased needs for housing, schools, medical facilities, roads, and other infrastructure. These are all areas in which Canada excels. In addition, there's going to be big opportunities for Canadian businesses, as well as for facilities such as the Port of Halifax, as China implements its One Belt, One Road global strategy. So there are great opportunities on both sides of the Pacific, and our government is fully committed to expanding and enhancing trade and investment between our countries. Growing exports is key to our government's growth plan. I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking to you about some of the other important areas of our growth plan. A year ago, we offered Canadians a clear choice. We offered them a plan for jobs and growth, an economic plan to grow and strengthen Canada's middle class. When we talk about the middle class, it's not just some sort of political construct. It's an economic fact that you cannot have long-term sustainable economic growth without a strong middle class. This week, the IMF's Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, while in Ottawa, said, quote, "I really very much hope the Canadian economic policies actually go viral." She was speaking about our government's plan for growth. She's talking about policies like our new tax cut in January, a tax cut for the middle class, our new Canada Child Benefit. These put more money into the pockets of middle class and low income families. And also she was speaking about our investments in infrastructure. Fact is, when you put more money into the pockets of families who really need it, they'll spend it on things that they need. That helps create middle class growth. When you invest in infrastructure, you create jobs and growth today while creating more livable communities and a more competitive economy in the future. All of this leads to a more prosperous and a fairer Canadian economy. It also helps you earn public buy-in support for liberalized trade. On the other hand, if the wealth created by trade and globalization is not shared equitably in our society, frustration builds and it feeds a protectionist sentiment. These are some of the factors that have led to the Brexit vote in the UK and some of what's happening in the current political situation in the US. Here in Canada, I believe very strongly that our plan to strengthen the middle class can help build support for the liberalized trade policies we need to grow our economy. New frontiers are waiting for Canadian businesses in Europe and Asia and around the world. To grow our economy, we need Canadian businesses, big and small, to partner with us and to tap into these markets. Our government believes it's more than just signing trade agreements. We want to partner with you every step of the way as we work together to build global markets that will create good jobs and prosperity here at home. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you this morning.